So good evening, welcome. This is Unit 3 of our Multifamily Homebuyer course hosted by the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation Southern Vermont Economy Project and Windham and Windsor Housing Trust. So this whole series is bringing more information to people who are interested in purchasing a multifamily home and owning it, usually occupying it as a way to afford owning property and also providing housing for others. So tonight, we're really going to dig into, I think this is the session where we did this a year and a half ago. And in this session, there's the most things that are different. And it really speaks to how kind of on a state level, on a local level in Vermont, there's been a lot of changes around how we're thinking about housing, how we're providing resources and funding for housing, and how we're thinking about zoning that makes more flexible housing options in appropriate areas where it's appropriate to have more density. So we have with us today Sue Fillion from the Town of Brattleboro. She's the planning director. She'll talk us through kind of from that standpoint, both with her planning hat and then also with sort of a town administrative hat of when you need a permit, what you need to know about zoning. And then we have Paul Martorano here from the Windham Windsor Housing Trust. And he is really an expert on thinking about renovating and rehabilitating homes, resources you need, how to think about that. And I think this is important because, Vermont has older housing stock. So it's chances are a lot of properties or multifamily homes you would buy would be ripe for some renovation. And that's just a way really to think about what you would do, what changes you can make, what resources are there so that you can make that home better housing or better experience for your tenants. And so we'll go through all that today. So I'm going to just start them off. So if you want to share the screen and you two can introduce yourselves and just start off.
Great, thanks, Meg. As Meg mentioned, I'm Sue Fillion. I'm the planning director for the Town of Brattleboro, and I'll be speaking to zoning and permitting and kind of those processes. And with me is Paul Martorano. Paul, let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Paul with the Windham and Windsor Housing Trust. I'm the multifamily rental rehab program coordinator. And I'll be talking about mostly what I'm, different, property management and ways of, maintenance and repairs and some programs that are out in the state currently available to help property owners to develop or to rehab some of the old properties that they have. Okay, I think so. This is really me. So rehab and management starts here is the big slide here. But basically what this is, what I'd like to get across is that, when you become, I don't know if, people generally here are not owners of multifamily properties yet. And this is who we're really speaking to here or trying to, for me, I like to point out that, if you're going to purchase a multifamily property, 2-3 unit building, you become a property manager. And part of property management, I'm not going to get into this tonight, but, tenant relationships, but also, I wanted to make, that's something that we're going to talk to in the next episode, the next webinar. But what the other thing is the property management. How I'm purchasing a building, and so from the beginning, if I'm purchasing this building, I really want to know, how's this budget gonna work out for me? So that's really what a property manager needs to do. It's about budgeting. It's about keeping that property up to date. So here right now, if anybody's been looking for properties already, you know that this is not a normal kind of a market. The interest rates are going up. So part of your budgeting, right now I've checked just on, like a calculator, mortgage calculator out there, basic, the interest rate that I saw, that jumped out at me was a 7.125%, which basically is $6.74 for every $1,000, right? So that's your first number, right? You look at the price of the house, you look at the cost of the mortgages, and then you can sort of figure out what that, just have that kind of a general ballpark image in your mind of what it's going to cost. So the prices of the properties are going up. There's not a lot of them in the area. Not here to rain on everybody's parade, but that's the situation out there. And I think that as as a property manager, I suggest people look at more than one house before they purchase it. Do a little shopping around, and so that's kind of where I'm going to go tonight. And I guess we can change the slide now. And so if you are looking at properties, you want to try to stay organized. And this is just something that I use to give a quick assessment of a property that I go into, as my role at Windham and Windham Housing Trust. But sorry about that. So basically, it's like I said, trying to look at more than one property, trying to stay organized. Here's a sheet that you could do something like this, like the property address. And this is like when you begin your search. You begin your search today, you can go online and you can get all sorts of information online, And so basically this sheet could start there. So you look at a property, you think, oh, that one looks good. It's in my budget. And here it is. There's the address, number of units. You can get a lot of this information from the sheet. That's, page one, is this a stick-built house? Is it a modular home? That kind of thing. How big are how many units are there? How many bedrooms is each one? Because that is important in knowing how much, rent you might be able to capture later on. But then, these other things like you can see a lot of times from the images, you can see the exterior. Some of them will show you interior things. Some of the main things you want to look at, roofs, siding, things like that, right, are all on this list, right? And on the way I have it, it's in very good condition, meaning it doesn't need any help at all, or it's in really critical condition by the looks of it, and it's going to need to be replaced right away. And so those things you can just mark down from the images or, later on from a walkthrough. So this is a kind of sheet that you'd keep with you, sort of keep a folder of each property that you're interested in, and go from there. So with that said, the next slide, I believe, is yes. Okay, so here's a home that was for sale. I went and searched Windham County, and I found only, I think it was 8 properties in Windham County that were multifamily. So that's not really a lot, right? This particular one is for sale in Rockingham for $225. The range that I saw was $145 for the least expensive one to $400,000 or something like that for the most expensive. So I chose this one mainly because it was in the middle, but also because there were enough images. Now, if you notice, like if you do that search, you'll notice that those lower end properties don't always have pictures of the interior, so you really can't find out a lot from the website. So the reason I chose this one is because I can actually get information from the website. And the other thing is if you are interested, you can call the realtor and say, I want to see the, I want to see the information, the realtor documents on this property, the seller's disclosure, and things like that. The seller's disclosure is important, but you can get copies of the deed if you're interested in things like that. But from this image, we can see that the exterior, and now if I had that sheet, I tried to do a side by side, but I'm afraid I couldn't. But so you can see just from this picture, you can look up at the soffits. I can't really point or anything, but you can see up at the soffits, it's a you can see there's it looks like peeling paint, perhaps rotting wood right under where the porch and the right side of this property, the porch, and you can see the siding is peeling and there's some deteriorated wood. So that's a sign that potentially, well, first of all, you're going to need a paint job at the very least, eventually. But if you leave that too long, you don't know how long that's been left like that. But that's the kind of thing you might be able to get from a disclosure statement. They'll say it was painted 7 years ago or whatever. But if you leave that too long, that could create underlying problems. Now you look and you see these windows, they're not, you can see they're not like the newest windows. I don't think they're original. This property particularly is 100 years old, I believe. And so they're not particularly, I don't think they're 100 years old, but they're probably not put in, within the last 5 or 10 years. So if you look at this particular place, basically we're thinking budget, like potential work downstream. I know from the sheet that this has a slate roof on it. The chimney, I can't zoom in or anything. This is when maybe if I'm interested, I might do a drive-by. But, so I know that this has 4 units, 2 bedrooms each, and I use the HUD fair market rate. That's basically $1,150. That's a little less than what you might see in the newspapers or wherever you look, Craigslist or whatever, for a 2-bedroom apartment in Rockingham. But that also, the HUD gross rate also would include heat, hot water, cooking, fuel, electric, and trash removal. So that's, if you did, this is important if you, later on, I'm going to be talking about a VHIP program, and that could potentially help you to get some funding and that's one of the stipulations in the VHIP grant, that you have to follow this particular formula. So that's the exterior. Then you can also see from the interior, I look at the interior and I can see that kitchen floor looks like it might be peeling up. The walls definitely haven't been painted in the last couple of months. You can see that it really needs some upgrading. The bathroom has a handicap bar, which is good. The fixtures don't look too bad. It doesn't look like any of the linoleum's peeling up. Now, these are the kind of things that you can kind of see from these images, but you really, for the interior stuff, you really want to get out there and take a walkthrough if you're interested in the property. So the next slide, when you do go for your walkthrough, don't forget the basement. But you can see from the photos, this is actually a photo from a different house, because most of the time they don't take pictures in the basement. And so, but here you can see from these photos that the electric looks like it could potentially, it's it's not screw-in fuses, and it's not anything less than that, which you do still find in Vermont. And so this at least is a 100 amp system. I can't tell if it's more than that. Today you want to be looking for 200 amp systems if you want to put any, so at least 200 amp system if you want to use some of the newer types of heating systems that are electrical, because they do have a higher draw on them, like heat pumps and things like that. For a house this size, you'd probably need to upgrade your electrical system to maybe 300 or 400 amp, to make that work. Because the heat pumps do draw, they're 240 power going to them, the direct current that goes to them. And so you need to have, it's AC, I believe, but it's 240. And but you need a larger box. You need to be able to put at least, I would say, a 300 amp system at least, or more, maybe. This one, you have a boiler that's kind of old, probably maybe 90s, 80s, 90s, still burning oil, but the oil tank looks like it's good. You could probably leave that's something that you could leave alone, because you got the heating system. So you can look and say, well, that's something that I don't have to worry about. The chimney looked okay from the top. And these are the kind of things that you can get, again, from the listing sheet, that will tell you what the heating system is and things like that. So, but you really want to go out, take a walk through, take some pictures like this, add them to your folder, and then you can really, that will give you that look back later. Because when you get out there, and you're looking, sometimes you forget things, and that's why it's important to take that list with you and say, oh, look, I forgot to go in the basement. Isn't that silly?
Just to interrupt quickly, Paul, Lynn raised a hand. She has a question. Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, Lynn, you're muted here. Can you unmute? Or do you want to put the question in the chat?
No, I got it.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. So, hi, Paul.
Hi, Lynn.
So the rent, do I understand the rental rates are set by HUD. So under the grant programs, you can only charge a certain amount.
Yes, that's the VHIP program. That's not, the actual state of Vermont, but that's the VHIP program that I will be talking about more about that in a bit after but yes, that's true. Yep.
And so also that utilities must be included.
They don't have to be included, but if you are going to include them, that's the top rate. If you're not going to include any one of them, then there's a specific amount set by the Vermont Housing Authority that you would have to deduct from that top rate depending on the type of system you have. So in this case, with an oil heating system, I believe that if you had like a 2-bedroom or something like that in there, you'd end up deducting probably almost $200 because of the oil heat, if you let the tenants pay for it.
And how do I convince the realtor or the owner to release the rental income and expenses that they currently have?
Well, that's a good question. I think you can get that from the realtor. I mean, even if you're not using a buyer's agent, you can just ask the seller's agent for that information, and I believe they have to give it to you. So
and we did talk about this. I would say if you watched the recording from the other night, I don't know if you heard Ethan's presentation, the lawyer, but lawyers can help with that. So that would also be a question from your lawyer, because you can have them organize, like sometimes if leases have gone to month by month, you want to find out how much really are they paying despite what the old lease might say. And you can, your lawyer can help you determine that information if you need to. There's certificates they can fill out. So that's in there. Ethan presented about that. So that'd be also a question for your lawyer to make sure that that information is required to be part of your purchase and sale agreement.
Yeah, and also, actually, I don't want to dive too deep into the VHIP program right now, but the VHIP program particularly, and many other things that have restrictions, the VHIP program has a covenant that actually attaches to your lease, so it shows up on your lease, on your deed, which is why it's important to if you're interested in purchasing a house, especially a multifamily, you want to know what, if any, restrictions you have on that deed. So giving it a quick read, it might say something like, that it could be anything, the gas, there's going to be a gas line coming into, the town soon. And there's an easement. So if the gas company decides that it wants to put an underground line under your house, they can come in your basement and drill a hole there and put a gas line. It could be really anything. So I always tell people, I recommend reading the deed, but I also recommend having a lawyer read the deed and the title of the property, so that those things, you're not privy to everything that they are privy to. So, but yeah, but anyway, yep. Okay. All right. So, I think that really the next thing, so you go through a walkthrough, and so we're still in I'm not sure I want to buy this place yet, but then you do go there and you think, oh, this is a good, I want to do this. And so the next thing you want to do is you want to, if you're going to make an offer or not, you want to make the offer contingent upon definitely upon a home inspection, right? If it has well and septic there, you want to have the well and septic tested, just to see if someone can take a look at it. And you can make these contingencies, right? You can put any kind of contingency on there, but a home inspector alone will give you a good rundown of the systems in the home, the roof, the exterior, water test and stuff like that. You can have them do that, add them do that. They'll look in the attic for any leaks, so they can tell you things like that. And so they will go through, and I, definitely, get a home inspection. And I would definitely, if I was going to make any offer, I would make it contingent upon a home inspection. And then when you do get the home inspector, he or she will give you a report and read it because it's important. A lot of, I mean, if you have, millions of dollars and you don't care, then, don't do it. Just give them cash and buy it. But if you don't, then I definitely would get a home inspection, because this is one of the most important steps to being a property manager, because it's going to give you insight into what you're going to have to do later. So go ahead, slide. I'm sorry. So anyway, and then the other part of property management that I think is really important is budgeting. And so that particular house, so let's say you made it contingent upon anything, the home inspector didn't come up with anything, you put an offer in, you give them the asking price, 225, because it's a multifamily, 4 units, you're going to probably have to have 15% down. There may be some other programs out there that I am unaware of. Talk to a lender, but the basic thing is 15% down. In this particular case, I think I added this one right. I think you have like about $8,000 in closing costs. That does not include the taxes. So I didn't have the tax number. So it would be something like you'd have to have about 41,750 plus whatever the taxes are. And so that means your mortgage is going to be about $191 $250. So that's your first. I mean, that's the first thing that you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay your mortgage and your taxes, right? That's the first expense that you have. And but the income, let's say you have 4 units in this building. You don't do a lot to it right away. You might get a little less rent. You didn't get rid of that wild color in the kitchen there, or didn't fix the floor. You might be able to get, let's say you get $1,000, right? So you get $1,000 a month. That's $4,000 total. That's $48,000 annually. That's 48, and the vacancy rate of 10% is sort of what it used to be. But right now, the last thing I read a thing about vacancy rates in Vermont, and there was something like 3%. And so that number would probably be lower. You don't have a lot of people moving around anymore, and people are pretty much, when they get an apartment, they usually stay in it. So that vacancy deduction would probably be a little less in this day and age. But so we'll say that it's 10% as a return to normal times one day. And so this is your basic asset to liability, the mortgage, the taxes, and your income from these units. And that means you're not living here, you're renting them all. Next. Okay, and so this is the cost of that. So the monthly total for that particular mortgage with the PMI, because you have only 15% down, so you have to pay primary mortgage insurance for the first, I think it was like about 8 years or so, but that's going to cost you about $1,816, a month, and that's 21,000. So if you just look at your basic costs, taxes, mortgage, water and sewer. I'm assuming that this is water and sewer because it's in Rockingham. Your insurance, and that insurance can be dependent of whether or not it's in a flood zone or not. So that's just a rough throw at number. So it's about 2,600 a month, so that you got 48 income, 26 definitely going out. So that leaves you about 1,200, 1,260 I wrote here. I was being more precise that day than I am feeling right now, I guess. So, but about $1,250 that you could have as income every month, right? And so annually, that's about 15,000. Just from paying this, right? So that doesn't include any of the other sort of costs that you might incur, which are here below: snow removal, general maintenance. And these numbers are a little conservative, but I would say it's probably going to be about $600 for general maintenance. So about half of that money that you're taking in is going to go to maintenance and snow, these kind of costs every month. So you might end up with an extra $500 or $600 after all this is said and done. You have your bank account. You should definitely set up a bank account for each property. There's all other sorts of things you can do with it, but you should definitely have like this account separated from your general personal finances. But that's just the basic idea. So it's not like you're not going to make $1 million in the first year. And, but it will, it's paying for itself, in this situation, right? You're not buying these big things, but we know that this house does need some larger repairs, just by looking at it. So the next slide would take a kind of a look at what those things might cost you. So, okay, so the boiler, we said, oh, that boiler probably lasts a while, but if you're going to go with oil again, that would be, you might get an oil tank and a boiler. That's $11,000 easy. A roof, just repairs and maintenance, like that has a slate roof, so you can actually figure on paying some money every year to maintain that roof, rather than if you decide to keep it. So over a period of 20 to 40 years, that could cost you, $20,000 just in maintenance for your roof. If you decide to convert the slate roof to, standing seam or, other something else, that's going to be a pretty good size roof. And I'm kind of looking at this house. If it's a pretty good size roof, I'd say that's probably, depending on the materials you use, it's going to be probably $15,000 to $50,000. I mean, these numbers are, and roofers, if you can get a roofer, I'd call them right away first. Before you buy, make sure you get a roofer in there. But no, I'm just kidding. But they can be kind of expensive. It's a big expense, but they do last a while. So if you notice, I try to put the years here, right? So a new roof, the lower end materials, 20 years easy. 40 years if you went and put all new slate up there, that thing's going to last you another 60 years, right? So or more. The thing that happens is the fasteners rust out. It's what mainly happens to those things, and the slates get flaky after a while. But you can still put them on. People still install them, but they're expensive. And that number is not here. It's probably way more money than that, but it'll last you a long, long time. If you put a new bathroom, say, if you decided you want to go in there and replace the fixtures, if you had to change some pipes, run some water lines up or whatever, 5,000, maybe 6,000, depending on how much roughing in you have to do. But just replacing the fixtures, $3,000-4,000. And those new, in a kitchen, 10,000, just replacing the fixtures, not getting too crazy, inexpensive cabinets. About a kitchen could be about 10 grand, right? So, but you put that new stuff, even at the lower end materials, that could last you 15 years. And if you get a long-term tenant, chances are they'll last you. Like if you get a tenant that stays in there for 10 or 15 years, then you'll get you'll get that out of it probably. So the siding is tricky because if you decided to paint, like say that house, I'd say it's going to be upwards of $20,000, right? Because you got to scrape it. There's going to be boards that need to be replaced. And if you're going to do it, you definitely want, if you find rotting boards, you're going to have to look underneath them. It's a very scary moment in life when you pull those siding off and you look underneath and you find another layer of rot. But, if you're going to do it, you really got to do it. So that, those numbers are really kind of conservative. But you can plan on spending at least that much over time, right? So windows, that number is also different now. I didn't update that, but I would say right now, $500 may be the minimum for a cheap window. But again, for a double pane kind of pull in type thing, you can get at least 25 years out of them. So these things, they take time to fade away. But if you can notice, they're definitely large projects, and so that's where that extra money should be going. I mean, in the commercial property management things, or you might have like a capital fund or nonprofits, schools and stuff. They sometimes will have like a capital fund. So when the HVAC system breaks, they're putting money in there every year left over from their budget, right? And so money that you don't spend. I mean, I wouldn't go out and, personally and go buy get a new car and say, oh, look, I got $400 extra a month. I think I'll buy a car, because you're going to need windows, paint, roofs, and things like that. So that's property management, is about managing that property. And if you do these jobs correctly, then you don't have to go back again and do them, So I definitely go out and do it right. Energy efficiency, and electrical upgrades. So energy efficiency projects, if you are doing, there's a lot of, organizations out there, and I've got a list of them coming up later for that you could get energy efficiency projects done either, from nonprofits or profits like Efficiency Vermont, things like that. And and so that number can be also, but if you put in a good, solid, insulation, you put some good insulation in there. If you do, it's not easy to do if you're not going to just rip the walls out and just plop up some new stuff, but it can be done. And if you have 4 or more units, 3 or more units actually now, if you have 3 or more units, the property is considered commercial. And so it opens up the door to other avenues of funding, which I will talk about after. Electrical upgrades, again, this is something that there's some programs out there in the that are for electrical upgrades, but if you want to use more efficient systems, a lot of things are going to electric now. Whether or not that's the way to go, I couldn't tell you, because I can't tell you what the future is going to hold. But right now there's a lot of interest in electric heat, electric everything, right? So cars and all sorts. So there's a lot of extra money out there. But if you do these upgrades, you can expect them to last you this many years. That's the point of this whole thing, right? So whether you get funding for it or not, you can expect them to last you that many years. So anyways, that's the foresight in what I'm, for long-term projects, which is a big part of property maintenance and management. So here we go. I think we're gonna just turn this right over to Sue, right?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, we're gonna switch the topics now, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about zoning and permitting. So before I switch to the next slide, I would just say, I think particularly around some of the zoning aspects, it's equally important in doing your due diligence, particularly if you want to think about adding units to an existing building. So you want to be able to know what you're able to do before you purchase it. So just a couple of basics of municipal zoning bylaws. So most communities in Windham County and throughout Vermont have zoning. And what they do is they govern the use of land and shorelands. They provide dimensional standards and other density, other kind of maximum building footprint, height, kind of controls over development. And they also, govern when you need permits. So the 2 pictures here are from Brattleboro's land use regulations. Figure 219, if you can read that, kind of talks about different uses that are allowed in the residential neighborhoods, whether it's single family detached, multifamily dwelling, 5 or more units, multifamily dwelling units that are 5 or more units in new construction. Well, that's not really applicable tonight, but those are conditional uses. And I'll talk a little bit about permitted and conditional uses and different reviews. So, first of all, you want to see the property that you have or you're interested in. You want to see what is classified by the town and how does it fit within the zoning regulations, because you could have a non-conforming use. You could have a 5-unit building that's in a single family, area. And so you just want to know kind of where it sits within the zoning. And then the bottom image is just on dimensional standards. And so in Brattleboro, we have a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. Actually, this just changed as of today. It doesn't change often, but now it's we've changed our zoning district a little bit. I don't want to get into that too much because it's neither here nor there. But most towns are going to give you what is the minimum lot size you need for your project or for the property. And where that can really come into play is, say you want to have a 4-unit building, you might need 24,000 square foot minimum to have your 4 units on it, plus extra land. So this is where this can be useful. If you're thinking that you maybe want to do an addition and you've already got a building at 3,600 square feet footprint, you need to know what is the largest size building that you can have. what is the height if you're thinking of adding more units by going up. So you're going to get that out of the zoning bylaw. And all the towns that do have zoning have a zoning administrator that's going to be able to help you let you know what applies for that property. I want to talk about two special areas in zoning that you should pay attention to. And the first is flood hazard areas. If you're from Windham County and you were around in 2011, you know Tropical Storm Irene had a lot of flood damage, and just this past summer in lots of areas throughout the state. So if you're in a flood hazard area, not only are you going to have an increased flood risk and potential costs to your property through, if you're carrying a mortgage, you're probably going to have flood insurance on it. And it can be substantial, particularly for commercial buildings. So it used to be kind of subsidized, and the commercial insurance is moving away from the subsidizing. So you could be looking at thousands more annually to carry flood insurance on a property. There's also increased regulatory requirements for communities that have flood hazard zoning. So in this map, you can see kind of there's a shaded orange area that's kind of right along the Whetstone Brook. That's called the floodway. And you might be able to see kind of on the bottom of the picture, there's a couple of the red structures that are in that flood hazard area. In Brattleboro, if you've been damaged, we actually don't allow you to, if you've been damaged more than 50% of the assessed value, we don't allow reconstruction. So that's a risk you're going to want to know. A lot of towns don't regulate in that way, but some do. In the yellow area, that's kind of the regular, what's called the 100-year flood zone. And in that area, if you get damaged more than 50%, you might need to bring it into conformance with the most recent national flood insurance standards. And so that could mean that if you have a basement, you might have to take your utilities and move them out of that area, because that's a flooding area that's below base flood elevation. So again, you just want to know if you're in a flood hazard area, because there are costs associated with that. And again, your zoning administrator in the particular town can help you through those regulations. And the other thing I just would want you to know is, perhaps you could pass it along to tenants too, is that tenants can have flood insurance. So if you are a property owner and you have flood insurance, it doesn't protect the tenants. They would need their own flood insurance. So that's just something to be aware of. I know in Brattleboro and Tropical Storm Irene, there were lots of tenants that didn't even know it was an option for them. So that's one area of zoning to really pay attention to. The other is either a design review district or a historic overlay district. The map that I'm showing is of Wilmington. They have two areas. The HR is the historic review overlay, and the VR is a village overlay, or village historic district overlay. And what you'll find in these districts is oftentimes that it's putting additional regulatory requirements on things, on new construction, on additions to existing building, on any alterations to facades. So you want to change the windows out and they're kind of 12/12, and you want to just put in, 1/1 or something. That's something that a special board might be taking a look at. If you want to enclose a porch that's on the front of it, we've had this in Brattleboro, that might have to come for some sort of review, and they'll be looking at standards to see if it complies. So that can really have an effect on what you might want to do. I don't know all the towns in Windham County that have historic design review. I know Brattleboro does, Wilmington does, Westminster, there may be others as well. So that's just another one to check in with the local zoning administrator. So the state of Vermont, the governor signed the Home Act, known as it's Act 147. When it was in the legislature, it was S100. And what it did is kind of made some changes to zoning that I want you to be aware of, because you might actually not see it yet reflected in local zoning codes because it's so new and it went into effect right away. So the home, I think it's housing opportunities. I shouldn't have even attempted it without writing it down. it's really designed to address the kind of critical housing shortage that communities are facing in Vermont. So one of the things that the Act does is allows duplexes, which is a 2-unit building, everywhere that single family homes are allowed. And so I think that that's really possible that you're not going to see that change in most zoning bylaws. You'll see it in Brattleboro because we just adopted new ones at the end of July. So we were able to make that change. But you should know if you're looking at a single family unit and you want to add a duplex, that might be something that you're going to be able to do. When the state says, or when the statute says allowed, it can either be a permitted use or a conditional use. So we'll have to see how towns choose to do that. A permitted use means that it's permitted by right and that you could just go and get your permit. A conditional use requires review by a special board, either the development review board, or in some towns it might be the planning commission. So that could be a longer process for you. Lynn, I see you have a question, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. Real quick, when it says duplexes are allowed everywhere single family homes are, does that mean every town in Windham County?
That is my understanding, yes, that if a town zoning allows single family homes, then it has to allow duplexes there as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan has put in the chat very helpfully. The HOME Act stands for Housing Opportunities Made for Everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Dan,
you.
for looking
Thank
that up.
you. When I'm actually done talking, the state just put out an FAQ on some of the HOME Act questions that they're getting. So I will put a link to that in there when I'm done talking as well, because it just came out yesterday. I'd been looking for it, and yeah, it could be useful. So the other thing the HOME Act did was basically multi-unit dwellings of up to 4 units are permitted in areas with water and sewer service. So I don't know how that one's exactly going to play out, but several towns have both water and sewer. Rockingham does, or Bellows Falls does, Putney, Brattleboro, not sure about Wilmington. But, so you can have up to 4 units in areas. So again, that might not be reflected in the local zoning yet. Dwelling unit density, that's a little bit more confusing, but it requires 5 or more dwelling units per acre in areas that have water and sewer. So if you're in downtown Brattleboro, the town of Brattleboro can't say to you 1 house per acre, because downtown is served by water and sewer. So we need to make sure that our regulations would allow for 5 or more in that area. And I would say, I think that Brattleboro is definitely more permissive, more progressive, maybe, in encouraging housing. So we were kind of meeting all these standards before. So Brattleboro could be a good place to look for a multi-unit, but all the other towns need it too. 3 other provisions from HOME Act is parking minimums, and this could be a big one for you. So parking minimums can be no more than 1 space per dwelling unit. So I think it's pretty common to look at local zoning and say you need 2 units per 2 parking spaces per unit. And the state is saying, no, just 1 per unit, per dwelling unit. So it's something that you need to balance. You might want to provide more because you know that your tenant might have a guest, or they don't allow on-street parking, but the town can't require more than 1. So that's one thing to know, and I don't think you'll see that reflected in most zoning right now. It'll happen over the next year, I think. The next 2 is limits on local appeals. So this is if your project is a conditional use. There's the state statute sets out different criteria to look at conditional uses, and one of them is character of the area. It's a standard where the use that you're proposing can't change the character of the area, or it can't be in conflict with the character of the area. And character of the area can also often be used in NIMBY kind of concerns, not in my backyard, if you've heard that acronym before. And so the statute has limited, if the particular review board, whether it's the development review board or the planning commission, gave you a permit, and they said that, you know, you meet the character of the area, somebody can't come in and appeal that based on the character of the area. And then the other one has to do is if you're in a review situation with a local board and you're meeting the basic standards, that review board can't throw additional standards on you that are go above and beyond what the local zoning ordinance is citing. So those are just some things to be aware of. I'm gonna switch to permitting. So in what situations might you need a local permit? Again, you always want to check with the local zoning administrator, but if you are going to do a change of use, so for example, if you buy a property and it's single family and you want to make it a duplex, you're going to need a local permit, a zoning permit if that town has zoning. Changing 3 units to 5 units. If you buy a building and it's got a commercial unit on the first floor and you want to make that commercial unit residential, that's a change of use as well. If you're adding square footage, if you're demolishing part of a structure or the entire structure, that's going to need a permit. If you want to take a deck or a patio or porch and enclose it, that's likely going to need a permit. If you want to have an accessory structure, such as, you know, a little maintenance shed or something like that, you might need a permit. So be aware. Most permits, you know, depending on what it is, it might be able to be administratively approved. So the zoning administrator is gonna approve that. But there are timelines that, you know, you shouldn't go in and expect to come out with a permit that day. The zoning administrator has 30 days to act on a permit, and then there's an appeal period after that. So again, be in conversation with the zoning administrator about what you want to do and what your timelines are. If it has to go for development review, either before a planning commission or a development review board, whatever process the particular town you're in has, it's an even longer time period. So most of those boards meet once a month, and state law requires that there's newspaper notification about 15 days in advance. So, you know, it could be, you know, up to 60 days before your particular case is heard, and then they have 45 days after that to issue a decision, and then there's an appeal period after that. So again, the point here is just be talking to your local zoning or planning department people about what your project is, and just know that it could take some time, and there's, you know, fees involved with it as well. I talked a little bit about administrative permits versus the development review and planning commission. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that. Other local permitting kind of considerations that you should have is, you know, if there's a water and a sewer district, the number of bedrooms that you have, if you're adding bedrooms or adding units, you may need a new water or wastewater allocation. That's the case in Brattleboro. It's likely the case in other communities. So you might have to talk to Public Works or who's ever in charge of those systems. Again, your zoning administrator can point you to the right people. Driveway permits, if you want to make your driveway wider or you want to add another driveway access point. If it's on a local road, that would be, you know, you might need something from the Public Works Department as well. Brattleboro does rental registration, and we have an inspection program. So I don't know about the other towns as well, but just one to be aware of. In Brattleboro, all rental properties are inspected every 4 years. They're supposed to be, and there's a registration and I think a fee in the years that you get inspected. So other communities might have that as well. Before I jump off of that one, in Brattleboro, if there are 5 units or more, you don't have municipal trash pickup. So that is an added expense that, you know, you might want to consider on your monthly expenses. I don't know how the other towns do that. And then there's state permitting, which is also really important to think about. So any of the projects that I kind of talked about, you know, if you want to do an addition, if you're going to create units, you might need a state permit, particularly if you're not on water and sewer. You might need a new septic design or something like that. So Rick Oberkirk is the state permitting specialist for our region. And so Rick is somebody that you should be speaking to early. Rental projects are subject to the commercial, I don't know if it's the commercial building codes, feel free to jump in, Paul, but and to the fire codes. So if you even have just one rental, you should be talking to Patrick Banks from the Vermont Department of Fire and Safety. His phone number is there. You know, you might need inspections, you might need permits for plumbing and electrical and code. And then there's also a requirement for rental properties to understand the laws about asbestos and lead. Our housing stock in Vermont is really old. And so if you're renting and there's, lead paint, you're going to need notifications. If you're demolishing and there's potential for asbestos, you're going to need to do notifications and have certain requirements. So that's just another thing to be thinking about. And in fact, there is actually an annual registration that you're complying with the essential maintenance practices for lead paint. So that applies to rental properties. So again, some links there, which should be helpful to you. Yeah, this is just repeating about the Division of Fire Safety with a slide here that Paul provided me with, when you might need a permit, does the contractor need to be licensed? So always worth a call to Paul, but to Patrick, I'm sorry, but this might be helpful to you as well. So that is my portion. And then Paul and we have some resources about funding and multifamily repair.
Yeah, maybe any questions up to now before we jump into the next section here?
I know that sounded all really scary, but as someone who is like a planning commission chair for a while, I think a lot of towns in Vermont are really making an effort. I know Bellows Falls is working on their zoning code. Wilmington is working on their zoning code to really institute best practices to be more flexible about developing housing in particular. So again, like your zoning administrator is your friends. Like they're not there to like, they're there to like make sure that you understand the zoning and that you're operating in accordance with it, and like do not be afraid of them. Like they are like literally there to help you. I know there's this, do I have to get a permit? Oh my gosh, but like really they're there to help you. And I think the climate has really turned towards really supporting housing. So just do your due diligence. And oftentimes it's good to do that like as you're in the process of thinking about purchase a building, even before you buy it, like, right? Like check that you're not in that flood zone, check that you're, where you are. And if you have like big plans for adding units or things like that, really just make sure ahead of time that you can do that. And they're usually pretty friendly people that are willing to tell you what you can and can't do. So just, don't be afraid.
Meg, I really appreciate that because I kept saying I want to preface it with it. I know it's a lot of scary information, but it's not that bad. It's just something that you need to be thinking about. And what you just said also reminded me that one of the things that we've started to see, particularly with multi-unit properties, is that when they're for sale, like they change the use to a 1 unit, to a single family home right before they list it for sale. And then it gets sold with the, kind of as being, it can be a duplex, and then the permitting's not right. And they do that because I think it's easier to finance and whatnot. But so we see some of that in the office. Again, so just understand it, what is it listed as and what are the possibilities before you purchase it. All right, Paul.
Here we go. Funding multifamilies can be pretty tricky. Like I said, if you're doing it on your own, then you're pretty much dependent on your home equity, your equity in the property, and income that you get from the property, maybe elsewhere, your own private financing. There's loans that you can get out there for sure, but there are, if you want to go to the next slide. There is a lot of other help out there for. Do we have some info on the next? Oh, that's right. So these are some of the organizations. Windham and Windsor Housing Trust is there. The Windham and Windsor Housing Trust currently for multifamily rental properties. There's the main program that we have right now is called the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. That program is being funded currently with federal ARPA, is the American Rescue Plan Act money that came to the state and has come to us through the Department of Housing and Community Development. We signed a grant with them, which means we have a number of requirements that go along with the program. So the basic formula of that. I think I kind of have another thing. I'm not sure if I actually have a slide for it, so I'll talk about it now. If we have a slide, we'll just zip right past it later. But so the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, basically, if you have multifamily that are, uninhabitable, they have code violations, and you really want to, there we go, thanks. I couldn't remember if I put that one in there or not. So this is, basically you can get a $30,000 grant for rehabs for out of code or, buildings that, properties or apartments that are just in really bad shape, walls falling down. It doesn't have to be that bad, but the key element right now is that they have to be vacant. There is a vacancy requirement in there, and that's a 90-day vacancy rule. I believe that rule may be changing in the future, but as it stands today, this is for vacant, uninhabitable, or out of code units. So for 0 to 2 bedrooms, you can get up to $30,000, $50,000 for 3 bedrooms, or $50,000 if you're adding new units. Now, a couple of caveats. If you really want to learn about these programs, the best place to go is this website right here. This link will tell you about VHIP specifically. There is another program I can mention, but this is for multifamilies, right? So these grants are taxable. You have to kick in you have to put in like a 20% match. You can work that match off. So that's part of being a property manager. If you have some skills in how to fix buildings, it'll help you out. Because you can actually earn up to $10,000, or just as a property owner doing painting or whatever, doing some labor around the property while these grants are happening, and you can work that $10,000 off if it's a $50,000, the 20% match off, right? So, but like I said, they are taxable, and there is the other stipulation with VHIP is that you are required to lease, give preference to tenant applicants that are currently housing challenged or homeless. In Brattleboro, you would be going to the coordinated entry lead agency, which is Groundworks, and trying to, they would send you some tenant applications. You can look them over. If there's a process there. But the main idea is that, this program is to get old units online and to get people that have low income or don't have housing into apartments. And so those are the two main points of this program. So that's that. There is another thing. So yeah, we can go back. So the other potential funding options out there is there's Sue mentioned lead. And we have lots of lead everywhere in the state. And the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has a Healthy Lead Safe Homes grant loan. It's actually a loan, but it's a forgivable loan. And you get it, and it's over 5 years. They'll come in, they'll do a lead test, they'll test your home, and then you can, they'll give you the money to do it. I think it's up to $60,000. But anyways, it's as over 5 years, what they do is they forgive 20% of the loan. So if you plan on keeping that house for 5 years, this is a great way to get the lead out of it, right? As they used to say, get the lead out, But So get the lead out, as they say, right? So this is a great way to do that. You can get the money, and that you don't have to make payments in this time, as the loan is in this term. There's some stipulations that I'm not positive of, and that's one of them. So I should probably take that back. But I think you should look into that program, and there's a link to it right there if you have lead in your home. Now, some of these programs are, like this one in particular, looks for, are you leasing these units at an affordable rate? They're going to see, do you have children in the building? Is there a potential for children in the building? I mean, if you have 3 studio apartments and no kids living there right now, they may not give you the money if you're a 40-year-old person living there or whatever. So they look at several different things, but it's definitely worth looking into. The other income-based program is at SEVCA, Southeastern Vermont Community Action Program, and they have a weatherization program. A lot of these buildings, the SEVCA mostly, I don't think they do windows anymore. I'm not sure about that, but I don't believe they do replacement windows anymore. Mainly they're into insulation, and they will go around sealing windows and doors and doing that kind of thing, like trying to close off the heat loss. So they'll do a heat loss thing, and they'll also do some upgrade the insulation, right? But they also, either you or your tenants need to be income verified. What is their threshold? I would go to that website and find that out. I think it's 80% area median income. So then the other, I'm going to kind of skip around and go down to 3E Thermal Capstone. 3E Thermal Capstone is a program where they work with property owners that have 3 or more units, and they do quite a bit of things, and they work with like tax credits. They'll come out. They'll actually work with you to organize the projects a little bit. They won't come out and be your general contractor, but they will come out and, if you're going to get insulation, they'll try to help you to find contractors. They'll try to get you some money for that, and they will look for cash money that's out there, and they will look for other sort of credits and things like that. 3 or more units. If you have a house with 3 or more units, I would, that's the first number I would call right there, because they could connect you to Efficiency Vermont. And Efficiency Vermont is actually is not a nonprofit. It's an organization that comes from, I think they started from Green Mountain Power, actually, and they're all about tax credits, energy efficiency. They really want to reduce the one of their goals is to reduce the energy burden on consumers and the energy burden on the state, really. I mean, by what they do. I mean, that's kind of and so they will come out, they'll come out and do a weatherization. They'll do a what do you call it, like a home heat loss analysis, and they'll come around and they'll help you to find tax credits and things like that. They work with mostly tax credits and refunds. They do, like if you purchase certain hot water heaters or heating units, they will give you rebates and refunds and find you credits. And right now, the big thing, like I mentioned earlier, going electric is all the rave, so to speak. And there's federal programs through the Inflation Reduction Act and things that have specific Energizing America, I think it's called, actually, and so they'll give you credits or cash. I mean, I think they even have like a tax credit. They'll actually just give you the money after the fact, I think, is how that works, to upgrade your power, your box, your service to your house, your panel, your electric panel. There's all sorts of, it really is all sorts of money out there, but Efficiency Vermont can connect you to a lot of them. They're really excellent. If you want to go with heat pumps and you really want to tighten up your building, and these places here are all good places to start. If you start with me, I will point you in that direction anyway. So, so you can start with them first if you want. It's but we all come around and we're all really trying to do the same thing. We all want affordable. A lot of, like, 3E Thermal will ask you to lease at a reduced rate. I think they use the HUD rent cap as well. I'm not sure if they have the utility allowance involved in it, but and they want you to, I think you sign on for a limited timeline to keep the rents under a certain and rent to people with a certain income. So those are big ones, 5 big ones, and the websites are there. Hopefully that'll be part of it. Brattleboro affordable housing. I think these are more like Sue knows more about these guys than I do. I think she works with them a lot more than I do, but. So.
I can speak to them. Brattleboro Area Affordable Housing has an apartment in homes program where they can help you. They give some technical assistance in how you can make an apartment out of your home. So this could be a good option if you're, maybe you buy a single family home and you want to add something else. And then I think in the end, you get a small grant with it to actually make the construction, to do the construction. And they don't really have any stipulations. They do really encourage that it be affordable rents. So that's one program you could look into. Town of Brattleboro has a rental housing improvement program. I'll be honest, it has not been used in years. So I think that maybe the lending is not favorable. But if you've got, this is more for if you have existing rental housing and you need to make some improvements to make it more livable. There might be some small low interest loans that are available to help with that. I think they're really looking for it to be used in the kind of preserving it. You're either gonna, the situation might be so bad that you might lose it. I think Rockingham also has a rental housing improvement program. Paul, yes, no.
They did. I think, I'm not sure if they carried that forward, actually. It might have
Okay.
come last year. So.
Okay. So, there are some other options available that, maybe somebody from the particular town can let you know of.
So there's that one again. We won't.
Yeah. So that's the conclusion of our presentation. We're happy to take some questions if you have them.
I would also just jump in for a second and say another really great resource for learning about this stuff is also, call Paul, speak with him, but also speaking to other landlords in the town. So I really encourage, and maybe this is something we can keep working on doing, is sort of having landlord groups. I know this is something that in Wilmington and Dover, just because I was talking with them today, they're trying to get together like a landlords group where landlords can meet and just talk to each other. Because I know, there's one landlord in particular in town, Todd Garris, and he was always great. He's he took a lot of older buildings, used a lot of resources. He will talk to you about how Efficiency Vermont has really helped him make his units much more efficient and nicer. And honestly, if you listen to his take on that, is if you make your units more energy efficient and you make them nicer, it's easier to rent them. And then people stay because you have a nice apartment. And so what we're going to talk on Thursday about tenant relations, one of the things that I've heard over and over from landlords is just hey, if you make your apartment more energy efficient, so they're paying less for heat, and they're warm. Also, more importantly, that your tenants are warm and comfortable, and that you sometimes it's really worth making these types of investments, because then you end up with a much nicer situation to manage as a landlord. So I would just say use other landlords as resources, get to know. So we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, on Thursday night when we meet again. We'll have some actual landlords, people who own properties there, who can really talk about that. Lynn is saying it would be helpful to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentations. Yes, I will share these out, probably not tonight because I have a tween at home alone. I have to go make sure she hasn't burned the house down, but I will share that out first thing tomorrow morning. And I will get these all posted to our website. It just has been a busy week. So by Friday, I will get everything up on the BDCC website and we'll share that out. So these are available. And then I'll urge everybody who watched these to share them with people they know who might be interested. So that's all I'm going to say. Who else has questions? Do you have any more questions for tonight? Lynn, looks like you might have some.
I did just want to jump in and pick up on that landlord, and maybe it'll be talked about Thursday. There is a landlord group in Brattleboro. So, you know, if you're looking at a property in Brattleboro, we could connect you. And I know that Springfield has a landlord league as well. I don't know. Rockingham sometimes moves the Springfield way, and sometimes it moves the Brattleboro way. So, there are some existing groups out.
Great. Anyone else have other questions? I know James just said he has to hop off, so we can, you know, take a couple more questions, or happy to just log off and just say we hope everyone will join us again on Thursday. And again, we will share all these recordings, and I urge you to share them with people you might think might be interested in finding this information. I think it's really important. So thank you so much to our presenters. Nice to see you, Dan. We'll see you again on Thursday at 5:30.
Yeah. See you again tomorrow,
Thanks.
Dan.
Thanks,
Thanks,
How's it
Dan.
going? I'm gonna give you a call. I'll be in Brattleboro tomorrow, Dan. I might give you a call. Are you gonna be around? Okay.
Great.
Around. All right.
Yeah.